Welcome to level 3 from A Fresh Approach Daily Drills. We're obviously on the keyboard part. In this level, we're still going to stick with our C major scale, which we learned the C 5-note scale and the G 5-note scale and put it together into our C major scale. But now we're doing 8th notes, so it's going to be twice as fast as our quarter notes. And we're learning a new musical term and a new musical device called the arpeggio. The arpeggio, which we'll get to later in the lesson. Let's start off with line number 1. Notice we're just using our piston stroke on 8th notes. We're using our 5-note scale from C up to G and back down. All right, an easy 5-note scale to memorize because there are no accidentals. Now we're playing in 8th notes, so we're alternating a little bit faster. And again, as we're playing, we do not have to think about one hand being above the other, because if we're playing with a great piston stroke, as I strike one note, as the other note is moving down, this one is getting out of the way. So you don't really have to think about anything other than making sure that the strokes start up and end up. So playing 4 notes on the C, you can see, even though I'm playing 8th notes now, that my hands are out of the way, so I'm just striking each note in the very center, the same way you would do on snare drum. So if you just look at that line, you'll see that it's 4 strokes per note, 4 8th notes per note, C, D, E, F, G, and back down. So I'm going to use my motion of leaning a little bit towards my left foot, and then leaning a little bit towards my right foot as I'm going back and forth. Limit that a little bit. You don't have to go all the way and all the way. All right. Basically, I just want to try to keep the mallet and the bar right in the center of my body as I'm moving up. Okay? It's kind of a weird way of doing it, but you might want to think of it that way. All right? So it looks and sounds like this. Now, I'll have to think of upstrokes on every single note. As I'm moving up and down, the mallets are heavy. They will not rebound, okay? And we definitely don't want to be playing downstrokes where we start high and end low. We want to make sure that the motion is always up, and that we're pulling the sound out of the keyboard. All right, line number 2 is the same exercise, but now we're using our G 5-note scale. So G to D, and then I'm thinking of standing right in between the center of both of those bars. Leaning just a little bit. Now, as you repeat it, see if you can look away from the keyboard. You can glance down occasionally, especially if you miss a note. But look away as much as you feel comfortable with all the way through. All right? You might slightly miss a note like I just did, but really it's just a matter of developing that kinesthetic sense. Remember that word, kinesthetic. Kinesthesia means our sense of the placement of things around our body. So I am learning how far away the keys are, what my hands are having to do as I'm moving up and down, my relation of my hands to the keys. We're learning all that stuff, just the same way you would do it if you're playing piano, not looking at your hands. Eventually, you see piano players all the time not looking at their hands as they're reading the music. They're doing this and they're reaching way over and they've got that tiny little key that they're hitting with their pinky. It's very easy to do, but you have to train yourself to develop that kinesthetic sense. All right, line number 3, we go back to our C 5-note scale. Notice that I'm just going up and down the keys, first in quarter notes, C to G and back down, and then eighth notes. So the quarter notes are simple. Notice I'm leaning over in this direction. All right, I don't know what tempo is, probably a little fast, but then when I get to the eighth notes, I'm double the speed of my quarter notes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and if I'm subdividing in my head on the quarter notes, when I get to the eighth notes, it will be right in time. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Now I have a lot of time to go back and forth with my lean, all right? So as I'm doing this, you might see me just move a little bit, but now I'm developing that a little bit of motion back and forth. Now notice that the heads of my mallets are maintaining straight up and down, right in the center of the key. I'm not moving one above the other. You don't have to do that if you're using a great piston stroke. All right, so really practice on that great piston stroke. Nice and center of the bar on every one of those strokes. Line number 4 is our G 5-note scale. Remember, G up to D, back down, no accidentals. Same rhythm pattern. Look away from the keyboard if you can. All right, if you can, you really want to get confident with it. All right, the best way to develop your confidence is to look away, especially when you're at home practicing and nobody can hear you make a mistake. Doesn't matter. You definitely want to develop that sense of the keyboard. All right, line number 5 is putting those two 5-note scales together to break down our C major scale. So the first measure is C up to G. Second measure is G up to D. Then I come straight back down, starting on D. And then G down to C. All right, so first it's the rhythm. 1 and 2 and 3, rest. 1 and 2 and 3. Then getting your sticking, right, left, right, left, right. Right, left, right, left, right. And then making sure that I'm positioned correctly. Now my low note is C, my high note is D now, so I just want to be with that G right in the center. And then as I'm playing and I'm moving back and forth. So again, great piston strokes right in the center of the bar. Rest. And rest and. And rest and. Now this is the hardest thing to look away from the keyboard because it's C major scale is really hard to play on keyboard because there's no accidentals to lock you in. But if you can kind of glance away, you might need to glance down occasionally, especially during the rest, but you definitely want to keep your eyes focused away from staring at your hands. All right, line number 6 is our same. Now we're putting together the entire scale, but we're doing double 2 strokes per note. Notice this one starts with double strokes starting on the left hand. So I'm playing my C major scale. But I'm using double strokes. All right, so practicing those double strokes, double, 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 always returning to the up position. You might have to take it really slow. Always coming back to up. Okay, when I get to that motion of the double strokes are incredibly important on all percussion instruments because we really need to develop that quality double. Eventually you'll be playing double strokes all around the keyboard. Timpani uses a lot of double strokes. Tenors marching tenors in the drum line in high school, or if you got a junior high drum line, that's where you're going to be using a lot of double strokes. So we really have to develop that. All right. Line number 7 is the breakdown of what I told you at the beginning, what's called the arpeggio. The arpeggio is a term that we use for a broken chord of any scale. So the arpeggio and the chord is every other note. So I'm thinking a C, E, G. So there's the first 3 notes of your arpeggio. So it's 1, 3, and 5. And then we don't go to B, but we go to C. So C, E, G, C. All right. So we need to think of every other note until we get to the G, and then we just skip over A and B and play C. All right. So this line has 4 strokes, alternating strokes per note, but practice that just thinking about every other note, C, E, G, and then C. So this is almost something that you memorize. The C arpeggio is our chord. If I had 4 mallets, I could play the whole chord, but this is the broken chord. Notice that I'm alternating all the way through, starting on the right hand, and then when I get to measure 3, starting with the left hand. All right, not a very hard exercise, but just learning and memorizing your C major arpeggio. All right, I know you've heard that before. So scale is every note. The arpeggio is 1, 3, and 5. And then you go back to the 1 again, but up an octave. All right. Line number 8 is our arpeggio, but broken into a rhythm pattern that we're going to use to play our arpeggios all the way through these levels. We start with a quarter note. We play 2 eighth notes, quarter note, 2 eighth notes. So we're starting on our left hand, quarter note, quarter note. Get that right? So C, E, G, C, G, E, C. All right? So you might want to take that measure very slowly. And then you just do it twice. Okay? Alternating all the way through. When you get to the third measure, it's just up and down without the quarter note at the beginning, and we move the quarter note to count 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and quarter note. So for using that rhythm pattern, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, there's no break, so you don't really have to think about your sticking. All right. So 2/2 of the exercise, you might want to just practice the first half a bunch of times until you get it down. 1 and 2 and quarter note 2, quarter note 2 and quarter note 2, until you feel very familiar with that, and then you can play it as straight eighth notes with the quarter note at the end. Quarter note, quarter note, and then if you get really good, you can look away from the keyboard as you're playing your arpeggio. All right, now line number 9 puts our major scale together with our arpeggio. So our arpeggio. So this line right here uses our just eighth note scale pattern where we're going straight up and down in eighth notes, and then the arpeggio straight up and down with eighth notes twice. So first 2 measures is our scale. Notice I started on my left hand, and then I went straight through, alternating all the way through. That means my right hand is on the top note, and then back down. So you might practice that a bunch. We kind of did that in the last lesson, but now we're in eighth notes. Then in measures 3 and 4 is my arpeggio twice. Okay, making sure that you're playing all the right notes, of course. This is going to be really important because we're going to learn other major scales after this, but this is our first major scale, just getting used to. All right, our scale and arpeggio. Line number 10 is the same thing, except for now I'm using the rhythm pattern that you'll see very often in a lot of programs that use quarter note at the beginning and the end. So the C's always have quarter notes. Quarter note, quarter note, and then with the arpeggio it's the same thing. Quarter note, quarter note. And then I end with 4 eighth notes and a half note. You don't have to do that, but you can play that arpeggio twice. You just need a place to stop. So I have it written as arpeggio and eighth, half note. All right. So that again is something just to work up and get really used to that scale pattern. Quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. All right, so practice that. Again, with all of the exercises here on this level, we're using our nice relaxed piston stroke. We're also playing with just enough velocity to get the mallets to where it's a nice smooth motion. All right, so we're not thinking of snapping every single note. Especially as you move to eighth notes, it becomes a nice relaxed motion. All right, and we're also thinking of making a great sound on the instrument. Okay, if you're playing on marimba, you'll be able to tell right away if you're making a bad sound. That's a lot of force. It's playing into the bar, sounds horrible. Sorry, baby. But you need to learn how to control your force, velocity, and then the arc of your up and down stroke so that you're playing above the bar. All right, all of those things are important. So practice this level for at least a week or so, along with the snare drum part and the accompaniment part. 4 minutes on snare drum, 4 minutes on keyboard, and then you will be in really good shape as you move on to level number 4.